Chapter 2 of the Last Journals of David Livingstone in Central Africa, from 1865 to his death. Volume 1 of 2, 1866 through 1868, by David Livingstone and Horace Waller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. Effect of Pioneer's Former Visit. The Poodle Chitanay. Results of tsetse bites. Death of camels and buffaloes. Disaffection of followers. Disputed right of ferry. Mazatu raids. An old friend. Severe privations. The river Leondi. Sepoy's mutiny. Dr. Rosher. Desolation. Tattooing. Ornamental teeth. Singular custom. Death of the Nassau boy Richard. A sad reminiscence. 1st May, 1866. We now come along through a country comparatively free of wood, and we could move on without perpetual cutting and clearing. It is beautiful to get a good glimpse out on the surrounding scenery, though it still seems nearly all covered with great masses of umbrageous foliage, mostly of a dark green color, for nearly all of the individual trees possess dark, glossy leaves like laurel. We passed a gigantic specimen of the kumbe, or gum copal tree. Kumba means to dig. Chang kumbe, or things dug, is the name of the gum. The Arabs call it sandaruse. Did the people give the name kumbe to the tree after the value of the gum became known to them? The malole, from the fine-grade wood of which all the bows are made, had shed its fruit on the ground. It looks inviting to the eye, an oblong, peach-looking thing, with a number of seeds inside, but it is eaten by maggots only. When we came to Ntunde's village, we found it enclosed in a strong stockade from a fear of attack by Mabiha, who come across the river to steal their women when going to draw water. This is for the Igbo market. They offered to pull down their stockade and let us in if we would remain overnight, but we declined. Before reaching Ntunde, we passed the ruins of 2 villages. The owners were the attacking party when we ascended the Rovuma in 1862. I still have the old sail, with 4 bullet holes through it, made by the shots which they fired after we had given cloth and got assurances of friendship. The father and son of this village were the 2 men seen by the second boat preparing to shoot. The fire of her crew struck the father on the chin and the son on the head. It may have been for the best that the English are thus known as people who can hit hard when unjustly attacked, as we on this occasion most certainly were. Never was a murderous assault more unjustly made or less provoked. They had left their villages and gone up over the highlands away from the river to their ambush whilst their women came to look at us. 2nd May, 1866. Mountains again approach us, and we pass one which was noticed in our first ascent from its resemblance to a table mountain. It is 600 or 800 feet high and called Laparu. The plateau now becomes mountainous, giving forth a perennial stream which comes down from its western base and forms a lagoon on the meadowland that flanks the Rovuma. The trees which love these perpetual streams spread their roots all over the surface of the boggy banks and make a firm surface, but at spots one may sink a yard deep. We had to fill up these deep ditches with branches and leaves, unload the animals, and lead them across. We spent the night on the banks of the Laparu, and then proceeded on our way. 3rd May, 1866. We rested in a Makoa village, the head of which was an old woman. The Makoa, or Makoane, are known by a half-moon figure tattooed on their foreheads or elsewhere. Our poodle dog Chitanay chased the dogs of this village with unrelenting fury. His fierce looks inspired terror among the wretched pariah dogs of a yellow and white color, and those looks were entirely owing to its being difficult to distinguish at which end his head or tail lay. He enjoyed the chase of the yelping curs immensely, but if one of them had turned, he would have bolted the other way. A motherly-looking woman came forward and offered me some meal. This was when we were in the act of departing. Others had given food to the men, and no return had been made. I told her to send it on by her husband, and I would purchase it, but it would have been better to have accepted it. Some give merely out of kindly feeling and with no prospect of a return. Many of the Makoa men have their faces thickly tattooed in double raised lines of about half an inch in length. After the incisions are made, charcoal is rubbed in and the flesh pressed out so that all the cuts are raised above the level of the surface. It gives them a rather hideous look and a good deal of that fierceness which our kings and chiefs of old put on whilst having their portraits taken. 4th May. The stream, embowered in perpetual shade and overspread with the roots of water-loving broad-leaved trees, we found to be called Nkanya. The spot of our encampment was an island formed by a branch of it parting and re-entering it again. The owner had used it for rice. The buffalo were bitten again by tsetse on 2nd, and also today from the bites of other flies, which look more formidable than tsetse. Blood of arterial color flows down. This symptom I never saw before, but when we slaughtered an ox which had been tsetse bitten, we observed that the blood had the arterial hue. The cow has inflammation of one eye and a swelling on the right lumbar portion of the pelvis. The gray buffalo has been sick, but this I attribute to unmerciful loading, for his back is hurt. The camels do not seem to feel the fly, though they get weaker from the horrid running sores upon them and hard work. There are no symptoms of tsetse in mules or donkeys, but one mule has had his shoulder sprained, and he cannot stoop to eat or drink. We saw the last of the flanking range on the north. The country in front is plain, with a few detached granitic peaks shot up. The Makoa in large numbers live at the end of the range in a place called Nayuchi. At Nyamba, a village where we spent the night of the 5th, was a doctoress and rainmaker, who presented a large basket of skoro, or, as they call it in India, mung, and a fowl. She is tall and well made, with fine limbs and feet, and was profusely tattooed all over. Even her hips and buttocks had their elaborate markings. No shame is felt in exposing those parts. A good deal of salt is made by lixivation of the soil and evaporating by fire. The head woman had a tame conga tole, or tufted guinea fowl, with bluish instead of white spots. In passing along westwards after leaving the end of the range, we came first of all on sandstone hardened by fire, then masses of granite, as if in that had been contained the igneous agency of partial metamorphosis. It had also lifted up the sandstone so as to cause a dip to the east. Then the syenite, or granite, seemed as if it had been melted, for it was all in striae, which striae, as they do elsewhere, run east and west. With the change in geological structure, we get a different vegetation. Instead of the laurel-leaved trees of various kinds, we have African ebonies, acacias, and mimosae. The grass is shorter and more sparse, and we can move along without wood-cutting. We were now opposite a hill on the south called Simba, a lion, from its supposed resemblance to that animal. A large Mahiba population live there and make raids occasionally over to this side for slaves. 6th May, 1866. Tsetse again. The animals look drowsy. The cow's eye is dimmed. When punctured, the skin emits a stream of scarlet blood. The people hereabouts seem intelligent and respectful. At service, a man began to talk, but when I said, "Ku soma mulungu," we wish to pray to God, he desisted. It would be interesting to know what the ideas of these men are, and to ascertain what they have gained in their communings with nature during the ages past. They do not give the idea of that boisterous wickedness and disregard of life which we read of in our own dark ages. But I have no one to translate, although I can understand much of what is said on common topics, chiefly from knowing other dialects. 7th May, 1866. A camel died during the night, and the gray buffalo is in convulsions this morning. The cruelty of these sepoys vitiates my experiment, and I expect many camels, one buffalo, and one mule to die yet. They sit down and smoke and eat, leaving the animals loaded in the sun. If I am not with them, it is a constant dawdling. They are evidently unwilling to exert themselves, they cannot carry their belts and bags, and their powers of eating and vomiting are astounding. The Makande villages are remarkably clean, but no sooner do we pass a night in one than the fellows make it filthy. The climate does give a sharp appetite, but these sepoys indulge it till relieved by vomiting and purging. First of all they breakfast, then an hour afterwards they are sitting eating the pockets full of corn maize they have stolen and brought for the purpose, whilst I have to go ahead. Otherwise, we may be misled into a zigzag course to see Ali's friends. And if I remain behind to keep an eye on the sepoys on the move, it deprives me of all the pleasure of traveling. We have not averaged 4 miles a day in a straight line, yet the animals have often been kept in the sun We have not averaged 4 miles a day in a straight line, yet the animals have often been kept in the sun for 8 hours at a stretch. When we get up at 4 a.m., we cannot get underway before 8 o'clock. Sepoys are a mistake. 7th May, 1866. We are now opposite a mountain called Nabagala, which resembles from the northeast an elephant lying down. Another camel, a very good one, died on the way. Its shiverings and convulsions are not at all like what we observed in horses and oxen killed by tsetse, but such may lie the cause, however. The only symptom pointing to the tsetse is the arterial-looking blood, but we never saw it ooze from the skin after the bite of the gadfly, as we do now. 8th May, 1866. We arrived at a village called Japande, or Lapande, which lies opposite a granitic hill on the other side of the river, where we spent a night on our boat trip, called Nakapuri. This is rather odd, for the words are not Makande, but Sikwana, and signify goat's horn, from the projections jutting out from the rest of the mass. I left the Havildar, sepoys, and Nasik boys here in order to make a forced march forward, where no food is to be had, and send either to the south or westwards for supplies, so that after they have rested the animals and themselves 5 days, they may come. 1 mule is very ill, 1 buffalo drowsy and exhausted, 1 camel a mere skeleton from bad sores, and another has an enormous hole at the point of the pelvis, which sticks out at the side. I suspect that this was made maliciously, for he came from the field bleeding profusely. No tree would have perforated a round hole in this way. I take all goods and leave only the sepoys' luggage, which is enough for all the animals now. 9th May, 1866. I went on with the Johanna men and 24 carriers, for it was a pleasure to get away from the sepoys and Nasik boys, the two combined to overload the animals. I told them repeatedly that they would kill them, but no sooner had I adjusted the burdens and turned my back than they put on all their things. It was, however, such continual vexation to contend with the sneaking spirit that I gave up annoying myself by seeing matters, though I felt certain that the animals would all be killed. We did at least 8 miles pleasantly well and slept at Madoa village. The rocks are still syenite. We passed a valley with the large thorny acacias of which canoes are often made, and a euphorbaceous tree with seed vessels as large as mandarin oranges, with 3 seeds inside. We were now in a country which, in addition to the Mazatu invasion, was suffering from one of those inexplicable droughts to which limited and sometimes large portions of this country are subject. It had not been nearly so severe on the opposite or south side, and thitherto the Mazatu had not yet penetrated. Rushes, which plagued us nearer the coast, are not observed now. The grass is all crisp and yellow, many of the plants are dead, and leaves are fallen off the trees as if winter had begun. The ground is covered with open forest, with here and there thick jungle on the banks of the streams. All the rivulets we have passed are mere mountain torrents filled with sand, in which the people dig for water. We passed the spot where an Arab called Burkal was asked payment for leave to pass. After 2.5 days' parley, he fought, killed 2 Makande, and mortally wounded a headman, which settled the matter. No fresh demand has been made. Ali's brother also resisted the same sort of demand, fought several times, or until 3 Makande and 2 of his people were killed. They then made peace, and no other exactions have been made. 11th May, 1866. We now found a difficulty in getting our carriers along on account of exhaustion from want of food. In going up a sand stream called the Nayere, we saw that all moist spots had been planted with maize and beans, so the loss caused by the Mazatu, who swept the land like a cloud of locusts, will not be attended by much actual starvation. We met a runaway woman. She was seized by Ali, and it was plain that he expected a reward for his pains. He thought she was a slave, but a 1/4 mile off was the village she had left, and it being doubtful if she were a runaway at all, the would-be fugitive slave capture turned out a failure. 12th May, 1866. About 4 minutes east-northeast of Madatawa, or Nyamatolole, our former turning point. 13th May, 1866. We halted at a village at Matawatawa. A pleasant-looking lady, with her face profusely tattooed, came forward with a bunch of sweet reed, or sorghum saliceratum, and laid it at my feet, saying, "I met you here before," pointing to the spot on the river where we turned. I remembered her coming then, and that I asked the boat to wait while she went to bring us a basket of food, and I think it was given to Chico, and no return made. It is sheer kindliness that prompts them sometimes, though occasionally people do make presents with a view of getting a larger one in return. It is pleasant to find that it is not always so. She had a quiet, dignified manner, both in talking and walking, and I now gave her a small looking-glass, and she went and brought me her only fowl and a basket of cucumber seeds from which oil is made. From the amount of oily matter they contain, they are nutritious when roasted and eaten as nuts. She made an apology, saying there were hungry times at present. I gave her a cloth and so parted with Kanyangonge, or as her name may be spelled, Kanyanyone. The carriers were very useless from hunger, and we could not buy anything for them, for the country is all dried up, covered sparsely with mimosas and thorny acacias. 14th May, 1866. I could not get the carriers on more than an hour and 3/4. Men tire very soon on empty stomachs. We had reached the village of Hassaneh, opposite to a canonical hill named Chizwule, which is on the south side of the river, and evidently of igneous origin. It is tree-covered, while the granite always shows lumps of naked rock. All about lie great patches of beautiful dolomite. It may have been formed by baking of the tufa, which in this country seems always to have been poured out with water after volcanic action. Hassaneh's daughter was just lifting a pot of French beans, boiled in their pods, off the fire when we entered the village. These he presented to me, and when I invited him to partake, he replied that he was at home and would get something, while I was a stranger on a journey. He, like all the other headmen, is a reputed doctor, and his wife, a stout old lady, a doctoress. He had never married any wife but this one, and he had 4 children, all of whom lived with their parents. We employed one of his sons to go to the south side and purchase food, sending at the same time some carriers to buy for themselves. The sirocco and rice bought by Hassaneh's son we deposited with him for the party behind when they should arrive. The amount of terror their Mazatou inspire cannot be realized by us. They shake their shields, and the people fly like stricken deer. I observed that a child would not go a few yards for necessary purposes unless grandmother stood in sight. Matamora, as the Arabs call the chief at Ngamano, gave them a warm reception and killed several of them. This probably induced them to retire. 15th and 16th May, 1866. Miserably short marches from hunger, and I sympathize with the poor fellows. Those sent to buy food for themselves on the south bank were misled by a talkative fellow named Chikungu, and went off north, where we knew nothing could be had. His object was to get paid for 3 days, while they only loitered here. I suppose hunger has taken the spirit out of them, but I told them that a day in which no work was done did not count. They admitted this. We pay about 2 feet of calico per day and a fathom or 6 feet for 3 days' carriage. 17th May, 1866. With very empty stomachs, they came on a few miles and proposed to cross to the south side. As this involved crossing the Luendi too, I at first objected, but in hopes that we might get food for them we consented, and were taken over in 2 very small canoes. I sent Ali and Musa meanwhile to the south to try to get some food. I got a little green sorghum for them and paid them off. These are the little troubles of traveling, and scarce worth mentioning. A granitic peak now appears about 15 minutes off to the west-southwest. It is called Chihoka. 18th May, 1866. At our crossing place, metamorphic rocks of a chocolate color stood on edge, and in the country round we have patches of dolomite, sometimes as white as marble. The country is all dry, grass and leaves crisp and yellow. Though so arid now, yet the great abundance of the dried stalks of a water-loving plant, a sort of herbaceous acacia, with green pea-shaped flowers, proves that at other times it is damp enough. The marks of people's feet, floundering in slush, but now baked, show that the country can be sloppy. The headman of the village where we spent the night of the 17th is a martyr to rheumatism. He asked for medicine, and when I gave some, he asked me to give it to him out of my own hand. He presented me with a basket of sirocco and of green sorghum as a fee, of which I was very glad, for my own party were suffering, and I had to share out the little portion of flour I had reserved to myself. 19th May, 1866. Coming on with what carriers we could find at the crossing place, we reached the confluence without seeing it, and Matamora being about 2 miles up the Lioendi, we sent over to him for aid. He came over this morning early, a tall, well-made man with a somewhat severe expression of countenance, from a number of wrinkles on his forehead. He took us over the Lioendi, which is decidedly the parent stream of the Rovuma, though that, as it comes from the west, still retains the name Lioendi from the southwest here, and is from 150 to 200 yards wide, while the Rovuma above Matawata is from 200 to 250, full of islands, rocks, and sandbanks. The Lioendi has the same character. We can see the confluence from where we cross about 2 degrees to the north. We can see the confluence from where we cross about 2 minutes to the north. Both rivers are rapid, shoal, and sandy. Small canoes are used on them, and the people pride themselves on their skillful management. In this, the women seem in no way inferior to the men. In looking up the Lioendi, we see a large granitic peak called Nkange, some 20 miles off, and beyond it the dim outline of distant highlands, in which seams of coal are exposed. Pieces of the mineral are found in Lioendi's sands. Matamora has a good character in the country, and many flee to him from oppression. He was very polite, sitting on the right bank till all the goods were carried over. Then, coming in the same canoe with me himself, he opened a fish basket in a weir, and gave me the contents, and subsequently a little green sorghum. He literally has lost all his corn, for he was obliged to flee with his people to Marumba, a rocky island in Rovuma, about 6 miles above Matawatawa. He says that both Loienda and Rovuma come out of Lake Nyassa. A boat could not ascend, however, because many waterfalls are in their course. It is strange if all this is a myth. Matamora asked if the people through whose country I had come would preserve the peace I wished. He says he has been assailed on all sides by slave hunters. He alone has never hunted for captives. If the people in front should attack me, he would come and fight them. Finally, he had never seen a European before. Dr. Rosher traveled as an Arab. Nor could I learn where Lukumbu at Nugamano lives. It was with him that Rosher is said to have left his goods. The Mazitu had women, children, oxen, and goats with them. The whole tribe lives on plundering the other natives by means of the terror their shields inspire. Had they gone further down the Rovuma, no ox would have survived the tsetse. 20th May, 1866. I paid Ali to his entire satisfaction and entrusted him with a dispatch, No. 2 geographical, and then sent off 4 men south to buy food. Here we are among the Matambwe. 2 of Matamora's men act as guides. We are about 2 minutes south and by west of the confluence Nagamano. Latitude 11 degrees, 26 minutes, 23 seconds south. Longitude 37 degrees, 40 minutes, 52 seconds east. Abraham, one of the Nassik boys, came up and said he had been sent by the sepoys, who declared they would come no further. It was with the utmost difficulty they had come so far, or that the Havildar had forced them on. They would not obey him, would not get up in the mornings to march, lay in the paths, and gave their pouches and muskets to the natives to carry. They make themselves utterly useless. The black buffalo is dead, 1 camel ditto, and 1 mule left behind ill. Were I not aware of the existence of the tsetse, I should say they died from sheer bad treatment and hard work. I sent a note to be read to the sepoys, stating that I had seen their disobedience, unwillingness, and skulking, and as soon as I received the Havildars' formal evidence, I would send them back. I regretted parting with the Havildar only. A leopard came a little after dark while the moon was shining and took away a little dog from among us. It is said to have taken off a person a few days ago. 22nd May, 1866. The men returned with but little food in return for much cloth. Matamora is very friendly, but he has nothing to give save a little green sorghum, and that he brings daily. A south wind blows strongly every afternoon. The rain ceased about the middle of May, and the temperature is lowered. A few heavy night showers closed the rainy season. 23rd through 24th May, 1866. I took some lunar observations. 25th May, 1866. Metamora is not Undande. A chief to the southwest of this owns that name and belongs to the Matambwe tribe. 26th May, 1866. I sent Musa westwards to buy food, and he returned on the evening of the 27th without success. He found an Arab slave dealer waiting in the path who had bought up all the provisions. About 11 p.m. we saw 2 men pass our door with 2 women in a chain. One man carried fire in front, the one behind a musket. Matamora admits that his people sell each other. 27th May, 1866. The Havaladar and Abraham came up. Havaladar says that all I said in my note was true, and when it was read to the sepoys, they bewailed their folly. He adds if they were all sent away disgraced, no one would be to blame but themselves. He brought them to Hassanes, but they were useless, though they begged to be kept on. I may give them another trial, but at present they are a sad encumbrance. Southwest of this the Manganja begin, but if one went by them, there is a space beyond in the southwest without people. The country due west of this is described by all to be so mountainous and beset by Mazatu that there is no possibility of passing that way. I must therefore make my way to the middle of the lake, cross over, and then take up my line of 1863. 2nd June, 1866. The men sent to the Matambwes southeast of this returned with a good supply of grain. The sepoys won't come. They say they cannot. A mere excuse because they tried to prevail on the Nasik boys to go slowly like them and wear my patience out. They killed 1 camel with the butt ends of their muskets, beating it till it died. I thought of going down, disarming them all, and taking 5 or 6 of the willing ones, but it is more trouble than profit, so I propose to start westwards on Monday the 4th or Tuesday the 5th. My sepoys offered Ali 8 rupees to take them to the coast. Thus it has been a regularly organized conspiracy. From the appearance of the cow buffalo, I fear the tsetse is its chief enemy, but there is a place like a bayonet wound on its shoulder, and many of the wounds or bruises on the camels were so probed that I suspected the sepoys. Many things African are possessed of as great vitality in their line as the African people. The white ant was imported accidentally into St. Helena from the coast of Guinea, and has committed such ravages in the town of St. James that numerous people have been ruined, and the governor calls out for aid against them. In other so-called new countries, a wave of English weeds follows the tides of English immigration, and so with insects. The European housefly chases away the blue bottle fly in New Zealand. Settlers have carried the housefly in bottles and boxes for their new locations, but what European insect will follow us and extirpate the tsetse? The Arabs have given the Makande bugs, but we have the housefly wherever we go, the blue bottle, and another, like the housefly, but with a sharp proboscis, and several enormous gadflies. Here there is so much room for everything. In New Zealand, the Norwegian rat is driven off by even the European mouse, not to mention the Hanoverian rat of Waterton, which is lord of the land. The Maoris say that as the white man's rat has driven away the native rat, so the European fly drives away our own. And as the clover kills our fern, so will the Maori disappear before the white man himself. The hog placed ashore by Captain Cook has now overrun one side of the island, and is such a nuisance that a large farmer of 100,000 acres has given 6d. per head for the destruction of some 20,000, and without any sensible diminution. This would be no benefit here, for the wild hogs abound and do much damage, beside affording food for the tsetse. The brutes follow the ewes with young and devour the poor lambs as soon as they make their appearance. 3rd June, 1866. The cow buffalo fell down, foaming at the mouth, and expired. The meat looks fat and nice and is relished by the people. A little glariness seemed to be present on the foreleg, and I sometimes think that notwithstanding the dissimilarity of the symptoms observed in the camels and buffaloes now, and those we saw in the oxen and horses, the evil may be the tsetse after all, but they have been badly used without a doubt. The calf has a cut half an inch deep, the camels have had large ulcers, and at last a peculiar smell which portends death. I feel perplexed and not at all certain as to the real causes of death. I asked Matamora if the Matambwe believed in God, He replied that he did not know him, and I was not to ask the people among whom I was going if they prayed to him, because they would imagine that I wished them to be killed. I told him that we loved to speak about him, etc. He said when they prayed they offered a little meal and then prayed, but did not know much about him. They have all great reverence for the deity, and the deliberate way in which we say we don't know him is to prevent speaking irreverently, as though they may injure the country. The name is Mulungu. Makuchera afterwards said that he was not good because he killed so many people. 4th June 1866. Left Nagamano. I was obliged to tell the Nassik boys that they must either work or return. It was absurd to have them eating up our goods and not even carrying their own things, and I would submit to it no more. 5 of them carry bales, and 2 the luggage of the rest. Abraham and Richard are behind. I gave them bales to carry and promised them 10 rupees per month to begin on this date. Abraham has worked hard all along, and his pay may be due from April 7th, the day we started from Kidani. 5th June 1866. We slept at a village called Lamba on the banks of the Rovuma, near a brawling torrent of 150 yards or 200 perhaps, with many islands and rocks in it. The country is covered with open forest, with patches of cultivation everywhere, but all dried up at present and withered, partly from drought and partly from the cold of winter. We passed a village with good ripe sorghum cut down, and the heads or ears all laid neatly in a row. This is to get it dried in the sun and not shaken out by the wind by waving to and fro. Besides, it is also more easily watched from being plundered by birds. The sorghum occasionally does not yield seed, and is then the sorghum saccharatum, for the stalk contains abundance of sugar and is much relished by the natives. Now that so much has failed to yield seed, but indeed just in flour, the stalks are chewed as if sugar cane, and the people are fat thereon. But the hungry time is in store when these stalls are all done. They make the best provision in their power against famine by planting beans and maize in moist spots. The common native pumpkin forms a bastard sort in the same way, but that is considered very inferior. 6th June 1866. Great hills of granite are occasionally in sight towards the north, but the trees, though scraggy, close in view. We left a village called Makosi, and soon came to a slaving party by a sand stream. They said that they had bought 2 slaves, but they had run away from them and asked us to remain with them, more civil than inviting. We came on to Machakera, the principal headman in this quarter, and found him a merry, laughing mortal without any good looks to recommend his genial smile. Low forehead covered with deep wrinkles, flat nose somewhat of the Assyrian shape, a big mouth, and lean body. He complained of the Machinga, a Wayu tribe north of him, and the Rovuma, stealing his people. Latitude of village 11 degrees 22 minutes 49 seconds south. The river being about 2 minutes north still shows that it makes a trend to the north after we pass Nagamano. Makachero has been an elephant hunter. Few acknowledge as a reason for slaving that sewing and spinning cotton for clothing is painful. I waited some days for the Nassik boys who are behind, though we could not buy any food except at enormous prices and long distances off. 7th June 1866. The Havladar and 2 sepoys came up with Abraham, but Richard, a Nassik boy, is still behind from weakness. I sent 3 off to help him with the only cordials we could muster. The sepoys sometimes profess inability to come on, but it is unwillingness to encounter hardship. I must move on whether they come or not, for we cannot obtain food here. I sent the sepoys some cloth, and on the 8th proposed to start, but every particle of food had been devoured the night before. So we dispatched 2 parties to scour the country round and give any price rather than want. I could not prevail on Makachero to give me a specimen of poetry. He was afraid. Neither he nor his fathers had ever seen an Englishman. He thought that God was not good because he killed so many people. Dr. Rocher must have traveled as an Arab if he came this way, for he was not known. 9th June 1866. We now left and marched through the same sort of forest, gradually ascending in altitude as we went west. Then we came to huge masses of granite or syenite, with flakes peeling off. They are covered with a plant with grassy-looking leaves and rough stalk, which strips into portions similar to what are put round candles as ornaments. It makes these hills look light gray with patches of black rock at the more perpendicular parts. The same at about 10 miles off look dark blue. The ground is often hard and stony, but all covered over with grass and plants. Looking down at it, the grass is in tufts and like that on the Kalahari Desert. Trees show uplands. One tree of which bark cloth is made, pterocarpus, is abundant. Timber trees appear here and there, but for the most part the growth is stunted, and few are higher than 30 feet. We spent the night by a hill of the usual rounded form, called Njengo. The Rovuma comes close by, but leaves us again to wind among similar great masses. Latitude 11 degrees, 20 minutes, 5 seconds south. 10th June, 1866. A very heavy march through the same kind of country, no human habitation appearing. We passed a dead body, recently, it was said, starved to death. The large tract between Makocheras and our next station at Ngozo Hill is without any perennial stream. Water is often found by digging in the sand streams which we several times crossed. Sometimes it was a trickling rill, but I suspect that at other seasons all is dry, and people are made dependent on the Rovuma alone. The first evidence of our being near the pleasant haunts of man was a nice little woman drawing water at a well. I had become separated from the rest. On giving me water, she knelt down, and as country manners require, held it up to me with both hands. I had been misled by one of the carriers, who got confused, though the rounded mass of Ngozo was plainly visible from the heights we crossed east of it. An Arab party bolted on hearing of our approach. They don't trust the English, and this conduct increases our importance among the natives. Latitude 11 degrees, 18 minutes, 10 seconds south. 11th June, 1866. Our carriers refuse to go further because they say that they fear being captured here on their return. 12th June, 1866. I paid off the carriers and wait for a set from this. A respectable man called Makoloya, or Impande, visited me and wished to ask some questions as to where I was going and how long I should be away. He had heard from a man who came from Ibo or Wibo about the Bible, a large book which was consulted. 13th June, 1866. Makoloya brought his wife and a little corn, and says that his father told him that there is a God, but nothing more. The marks on their foreheads and bodies are meant only to give beauty in the dance. They seem a sort of heraldic ornament, for they can at once tell by his tattoo to what tribe or portion of the tribe a man belongs. The tattoo or tembo of the Matambwe and Upper Makande very much resembles the drawings of the old Egyptians. Wavy lines, such as the ancients made to signify water, trees, and gardens enclosed in squares, seem to have been meant of old for the inhabitants who lived on the Rovuma, and cultivated also. The son takes the tattoo of his father, and thus it has been perpetuated, though the meaning now appears lost. The Makoa have been half or nearly full moon, but it is, they say, all for ornament. Some blue stuff is rubbed into the cuts, I am told it is charcoal, and the ornament shows brightly in persons of light complexion, who, by the by, are common. The Makande and Matawambe file their front teeth to points. The Machinga, a Wayayan tribe, leave 2 points on the sides of the front teeth and knock out one of the middle incisors above and below. 14th June, 1866. I am now as much dependent on carriers as if I had never bought a beast of burden, but this is poor stuff to fill a journal with. We started off to Mataba to see if the chief there would lend some men. The head man, Katawanga, went a long way to convoy us, then turned saying he was going to get men for Musa the next day. We passed near the base of the round masses Ngozo and Makanga, and think from a near inspection that they are over 2,000 feet above the plain, possibly 3,000 feet, and nearly bare, with only the peculiar grassy plant on some parts which are not too perpendicular. The people are said to have stores of grain on them, and on one the chief said there is water. He knows of no stone buildings of the olden time in the country. We passed many masses of farraginous conglomerate, and I noticed that most of the gneiss dips westwards. The striae seem as if the rock had been partially molten. At times the strike is north and south, at others east and west. When we have come to what may have been its surface, it is as if the striae had been stirred with a rod while soft. We slept at a point of the Rovuma, above a cataract where a reach of comparatively still water, from 150 to 200 yards wide, allows a school of hippopotami to live. When the river becomes fordable in many places, as it is said to do in August and September, they must find it difficult to exist. June 15th, 1866. Another 3 hours' march brought us from the sleeping place on the Rovuma to Mataba, the chief of which, Kinazambe, is an elderly man with a cunning and severe cast of countenance, and a nose Assyrian in type. He has built a large reception house in which a number of half-caste Arabs have taken up their abode. A great many of the people have guns, and it is astonishing to see the number of slave-taming sticks abandoned along the road as the poor wretches gave in and professed to have lost all hope of escape. Many huts have been built by the Arabs to screen themselves from the rain as they traveled. At Kinazambe's, the second crop of maize is ready, so the hunger will not be very much felt. 16th June, 1866. We heard very somber accounts of the country in front. 4 or 5 days to Matarika, and then 10 days through the jungle to Mataka's town. Little food at Matarika's, but plenty with Mataka, who is near the lake. The Rovuma trends southerly after we leave Ngozo, and Masusa on the river is pointed out as southwest from Mataba, so at Ngozo the river may be said to have its furthest northing. Masusa is reported to be 5 days, or at least 50 miles from Mataba. The route now becomes southwest. The cattle of Africa are like the Indian buffalo, only partially tamed. They never give their milk without the presence of the calf or its stuffed skin, the folkchan. The women adjacent to Mozambique partake a little of the wild animal's nature, for like most members of the inferior races of animals, they refuse all intercourse with their husbands when enceinte, and they continue this for about 3 years afterwards, or until the child is weaned, which usually happens about the 3rd year. I was told, on most respectable authority, that many fine young native men marry one wife and live happily with her till this period. Nothing will then induce her to continue to cohabit with him, and as the separation is to continue for 3 years, the man is almost compelled to take up with another wife. This was mentioned to me as one of the great evils of society. The same absurdity prevails on the West Coast, and there it is said that the men acquiesce from ideas of purity. It is curious that trade rum should form so important an article of import on the West Coast, while it is almost unknown on the East Coast, for the same people began the commerce in both instances. If we look north of Cape Delgado, we might imagine that the religious convictions of the Arabs had something to do with the matter. But the Portuguese south of Cape Delgado have no scruples in the matter, and would sell their grandfathers as well as the rum if they could make money by the transaction. They have even erected distilleries to furnish a vile spirit from the fruit of the cashew and other fruits and grain, but the trade does not succeed. They give their slaves also rewards of spirit, or mata bicho, kill the creature or craving within, and you may meet a man who, having had much intercourse with Portuguese, may beg spirits, but the trade does not pay. The natives will drink it if furnished gratis. The indispensable dash of rum on the West Coast in every political transaction with independent chiefs is, however, quite unknown. The Moslems would certainly not abstain from trading in spirits were the trade profitable. They often asked for brandy from me in a sly way, as medicine, and when reminded that their religion forbade it, would say, "Oh, but we can drink it in secret." It is something in the nature of the people quite inexplicable that throughout the Makande country hernia humoralis prevails to a frightful extent. It is believed by the natives to be the result of beer drinking, so they cannot be considered as abstemious. 18th June, 1888. Finding that Musa did not come up with the goods I left in his charge, and fearing that all was not right, we set off with all our hands who could carry, after service yesterday morning, and in 6 hours' hard tramp arrived here just in time, for a tribe of Wanindi or Mandindi, who are either Ajawas, Waiawu, or pretended Mazitu, had tried to cross the Rovuma from the north bank. They came as plunderers, and Musa, having received no assistance, was now ready to defend the goods. A shot or two from the people of Kitwanga made the Wanindi desert after they had entered the water. 6 sepoys and Simon had come up this length. Reuben and Mabruki reported Richard to be dead. This poor boy was left with the others at Lapande, and I never saw him again. I observed him associating too much with the sepoys, and often felt inclined to reprove him, as their conversation is usually very bad, but I could not of my own knowledge say so. He came on with the others as far as Hassaneh or Pashassaneh. There he was too weak to come further, and as the sepoys were notoriously skulkers, I feared that poor Richard was led away by them, for I knew that they had made many attempts to draw away the other Nassau boys from their duty. When, however, Abraham came up and reported Richard left behind by the sepoys, I became alarmed, and sent off 3 boys with cordials to help him on. 2 days after Abraham left, he seems to have died, and I feel very sorry that I was not there to do what I could. I am told now that he never consented to the sepoy temptation. He said to Abraham that he wished he were dead, he was so much troubled. The people where he died were not very civil to Simon. The sepoys had now made themselves such an utter nuisance that I felt I must take the upper hand with them. So I called them up this morning and asked if they knew the punishment they had incurred by disobeying orders and attempting to tamper with the Nassau boys to turn them back. I told them they had not only remained in the way when ordered to march, but offered 8 rupees to Ali to lead them to the coast, and that the excuse of sickness was naught, for they had eaten heartily 3 meals a day while pretending illness. They had no excuse to offer, so I disrated the naik or corporal and sentenced the others to carry loads. If they behave well, then they will get fatigue pay for doing fatigue duty. If ill, nothing but their pay. Their limbs are becoming contracted from sheer idleness, while all the other men are well and getting stronger. They alone are disreputably, slovenly, and useless looking. Their filthy habits are to be reformed, and if found at their habit of sitting down and sleeping for hours on the march, or without their muskets and pouches, they are to be flogged. I sent 2 of them back to bring up 2 comrades left behind yesterday. All who have done work are comparatively strong. We may venture a word in passing on the subject of native recruits, enlisted for service in Africa, and who returned thither after a long absence. All the Nassau boys were native-born Africans, and yet we see one of them succumb immediately. The truth is that natives, under these circumstances, are just as liable to the effects of malaria on landing as Europeans, although it is not often that fever assumes a dangerous form in such cases. The natives of the interior have the greatest dread of the illnesses which they say are sure to be in store for them if they visit the coast. 19th June, 1866. I gave the sepoys light loads in order to inure them to exercise and strengthen them, and they carried willingly so long as the fright was on them, but when the fear of immediate punishment wore off, they began their skulking again. 1. Param reduced his load of about 20 pounds of tea by throwing away the lead in which it was rolled, and afterwards about 15 pounds of the tea, thereby diminishing our stock to 5 pounds. Dr. Livingstone's short stay in England in 1864 and 5 was mainly taken up with compiling an account of his travels on the Zambezi and Shiré. During this time his mother expired in Scotland at a good old age. When he went back to Africa, he took with him, as part of his very scanty traveling equipment, a number of letters which he received from friends at different times in England, and he very often quoted them when he had an opportunity of sending letters home. We come to an entry at this time which shows that in these reminiscences he had not thus preserved an unmixed pleasure. He says, "I lighted on a telegram today. Your mother died at noon on the 18th June. This was in 1865. It affected me not a little." End of chapter 2.